Hey everybody, welcome to NFL Fantasy Live, presented by EA Sports, Madden NFL 21. I'm Patrick Claybon. These guys are Marcus Grant and Adam Rank. Gentlemen, early here on the West Coast to wake up to some breaking news. Let's pour one out. Marcus, how do you remember the Leonard Fournette era in Jacksonville?
Oh, man. Yeah, kind of like that, pretty much, yeah.
Would you stop? He had that awesome run where he was waving on the Steelers defender and then knocks him over. And the Steeler defender gets up and starts crowing. And you're like, bro, Leonard Fournette gained 11 yards and they're up by 2 scores. Like, calm down.
I'm always going to remember the tweets, him roasting his teammates who are all playing for somebody else. I guess he will be soon at some point. Folks, if you want to have your own players, teams move around, you can sign up for your own league today at NFL.com/fantasy. It doesn't cost you anything. You can set up a team or a league in minutes, and you can win some prizes that will make your entire social network jealous. Maybe you could roast them, like Leonard Fournette did his former teammates. We will start, of course, with that headline of our fantasy headlines. That news coming out of Jacksonville. Doug Marrone says the Jags couldn't get a team to trade them anything for Leonard Fournette, so they just let him go. You have to think he gets picked up for somebody, right, guys?
Oh, absolutely.
I would think
He's going to get picked up somewhere, no doubt.
My biggest fear, though, is that as we look at it, we all think of the fun places he could end up. You're like, this would be great. And then you're going to be like, oh, cool. He got picked up by the Eagles. There goes all my Miles Sanders shares.
All right, so Marrone also saying today that there's not going to be a true number one running back, but a rotation based on matchups, the dreaded hot hand. Are any of the remaining Jags running backs, Marcus, worth a fantasy pick?
Well, according to the depth chart, Raquel Armstead is sort of the next name up. But if you are a hipster and you're trying to be ahead of the curve there, Divine Ozigbo is a name to keep an eye on. Now, I will throw this caveat in there. We are talking literally end of draft, sort of dart throw, hoping for the upside there because, as you said, it's going to be a rotation. This offense isn't great, and you're not probably going to get the requisite touches to make him worth having on your roster week to week.
Dude, if you want to go super hipster, James Robinson out of Illinois State. That's if you want to seem cool. You're hanging out at a coffee shop, you got a little, beret on or something. Bring up the name James Robinson.
You have to be wearing the beret. That's what's most important. It's mock draft Monday time. Our experts participated in a non-PPR mock draft with a super flex spot over the weekend. Let's see who's rising up the draft boards. Marcus, you first.
Yeah, Will Fuller is a name that in this draft, in a lot of mock drafts, and a lot of real drafts, I've been seeing Will Fuller move up the board there. And I think people are starting to sort of understand that the injury concerns are sort of included in the draft price there for Will Fuller. He's been a big play guy when he's been on the field with Deshaun Watson. 14 touchdowns in 22 games together. 7 of those have been 30 yards or more. And he's a great option in round 6 or 7, especially if you decide to go wide receiver heavy early in drafts.
And as everybody is listening to this advice and they will draft Will Fuller, I'll pivot to his teammate, Brandon Cooks, who's been pretty reliable over the last number of years. He's been a top 15 wide receiver in 4 of his last 5 years. He gets well over 100 targets in those seasons too. And so I look at it and I look at the situation and where you're getting him in the 8th or 9th round, it's definitely worth having this guy on your roster.
Well, I'm looking in New England at the running back spot, and the reason you're looking at our faces instead of videos, because I'm going with Damian Harris, and I think you could count all of his touches from last year on one hand. But Sony Michel has been battling injury. He just came off the PUP list and has really underwhelmed over the last couple of years or so. So there's a lot of buzz about Damian Harris there. And again, you're talking late in drafts, taking that swing, hoping for the upside there in New England.
And since we were talking about the Jags earlier in the show, let's talk about DJ Chark, who I think could be a great value for everybody in fantasy this season. Right when you get around round 4, 5, you start seeing his name in the queue and you're like, should I take a chance? My suggestion would be that you absolutely should. I think that the Jags could be in a lot of shootouts this season. I think what we saw out of Gardner Minshew last year was pretty positive. And I know that, he was a phenomenon and there's a lot of things around there, but he was actually a really good quarterback. And by the way, you can go read my latest piece on NFL.com, NFL.com/rank. I break down Gardner Minshew, and then you will draft DJ Chark as well.
All right, so let's leave there and go for a little would you rather as we compare players here at the same position, guys, but different draft spots, according to our NFL.com ADP. Marcus, would you rather have Russell Wilson in the 4th or Dak Prescott in the 5th?
Well, I'm going to lean with Dak Prescott here. And I love Russell Wilson. I think he's going to have a great year, and I'm drafting him in a lot of different spots. But we're talking about getting Dak Prescott in the 5th round over Russell Wilson in the 4th. I've got Dak as my quarterback 3 this year behind Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So you're telling me I can wait a couple extra rounds, get the guy I think is going to be the number 3 quarterback in fantasy football this year. I'm going to take that, even though I still think Russell Wilson's primed for a big season.
All right, Rank, would you rather have Keenan Allen in the 5th or the guy who propelled a lot of teams to fantasy championships late last year, A.J. Brown, in the 6th?
Okay, I'm going to say A.J. Brown. Even though I'm a big believer in Keenan Allen, I know I made a mistake in the past in doubting Keenan Allen before. I'm not doing that here. I'm just really excited about what A.J. Brown can do with a full season of Ryan Tannehill. And he was one of the players that we targeted on this show last year. And we told everybody, keep an eye on this player. We felt he was one of the best receivers coming into the draft. He showed it at the end of last year. I understand that the volume is not going to be there as much as there would be other teams, like if he played for the Falcons or somebody like that. But A.J. Brown could still be a league winner for you this season.
All right, Marcus, Raheem Mostert in the 5th or Cam Akers in the 7th?
I'm going Mostert here all day. I've sort of been concerned about that Rams running back situation just because Sean McVay names literally every running back I think he's ever met when he talks about who's going to get the ball. Mostert's been running as the starter in 49ers camp. I know there are other guys behind him, but he's going to get a lot of work, especially because they've had so many wide receiver injuries so far in training camp. Plus, 3 of San Francisco's first 5 games are against teams that were in the bottom half of the league when it came to stopping the run last year. It seems like a pretty good start to the season.
All right, Adam, let's finish it up. Calvin Ridley in the 5th or T.Y. Hilton in the 7th?
Well, Calvin Ridley is going to be my choice. He's been the darling of fantasy enthusiasts all summer long. Everybody projecting him to be the next Chris Godwin. But I do believe there's a lot of ability here. Last season, he was already the wide receiver 19. So he's already a good receiver. The thing that you have to look at, the numbers. When Austin Hooper was not in the lineup, he averaged 22 fantasy points a game. I'm not saying he's going to get that exactly this year, but this is definitely why you should be targeting Calvin Ridley.
Let's get some high upside presented by Caesars Rewards. We mentioned this week was our mock draft, a traditional league. So today we're talking non-PPR running backs that get a little bit of a rankings boost in those old school leagues. Marcus, we'll start there with the 2019 leading rusher.
Yeah, Derrick Henry. I mean, he is probably the chief among those guys that gets that boost when it's coming to non-PPR. You know he's going to get a volume of touches. That is undeniable, right? I mean, he's going to be among the league leaders in touches yet again this year. Once again, he should compete for the rushing title. Now, the one thing you hope for is that touchdown regression does not hit after having a big year getting in the end zone. Now, there have been reports that maybe he's catching more passes. We'll see. I don't know how much stock you put into that, but you know, if they could put a few more jump pass touchdowns in the offense too, that would be pretty great for Derrick Henry this year as well.
No, I agree with you, Marcus. And a matter of fact, I was in a standard draft this weekend, and I took Derrick Henry with pick 107. So I agree. And another guy that I'm looking at is Josh Jacobs. And a lot of, every time you do a mock draft or anything like that, everybody is always hesitant because he doesn't catch enough passes out of the backfield. Well, in standard leagues, none of that really matters. Last year, Josh Jacobs could have been the rookie of the year if you asked John Gruden. He certainly felt that he was. But he averaged close to 90 rushing yards per game. We expect the Raiders, who've really improved on the offensive line over the last couple of years, to really emphasize the run this season. So Josh Jacobs, if I can go Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, I will take that anytime in standard leagues.
Not to mention that over the course of 16 games, Jacobs would have been 5th in total touches in the league. I'm going up to Seattle and talking about Chris Carson, who it seems like every time we count out Chris Carson, he finds a way to come back and be productive. The Seahawks still want to run the football. I keep believing that Pete Carroll is actually Gaelic for #establish the run. There is some concern about Carlos Hyde in that backfield, but Chris Carson is great in terms of broken tackles. The one thing he has to clean up is fumbles. 4 fumbles lost last year. That led all running backs in the NFL.
Yeah, this is all fun until Fournette signs there. But whatever, I like Chris Carson too. But another guy I really like in standard leagues, Nick Chubb. And again, this goes back to the same conversation that we have about Josh Jacobs, is that people don't want to take Nick Chubb because a lot of the passing down work goes to Kareem Hunt, which is fine. But in standard leagues, this is a valuable running back. He's going to be one of the biggest rushers this season. Of course, with Kevin Stefanski, now they're calling the plays. They are going to establish the run. That means a huge opportunity for Nick Chubb, who I like in PPR leagues, even more so in standard.
All right, rookies, it's time to raise your game. Presented by EA Sports, Madden NFL 21. Well, we've told you plenty about the rookies that are must drafts this year, but how about the deep cuts? The guys that are just going to make everybody in your league go, whoa. Give us some names of the hardcore fantasy nerds that aren't us. We're excluded because we're cool people. Who are they going to love this year, Marcus?
Well, Antonio Gibson, I mean, he's sort of like those first couple of Black Eyed Peas albums before Fergie joined the band, where like you really have to be paying attention to kind of get that one. I mean, this is a guy that everybody sort of had as a deep sleeper in Washington at the beginning of draft season. Then after Darius Geis was released by the Washington football team, Gibson started to skyrocket up a lot of draft boards. And Washington says they want to get him the ball. Ron Rivera says, quote, "We have a plan." So what was once kind of an end of draft swing has now become a guy that you might have to target in the 8th or 9th rounds in order to get.
You know what? I love Antonio Gibson, but one player I'm going to go with right here is Zach Moss. And I feel like this might be too late. This is like when Coldplay's Parachutes was already on rotation with the radio stations. You're like, yeah, everybody's heard of him by now. I'm just, for anybody that has not been paying that close of attention, Zach Moss is going to end up winning this job for the Buffalo Bills. They love him. There's a reason why they brought him in, and that was to be the number one running back for this team. And so now we're starting to see his ADP creep up. It's like, you know what? You used to be able to go and see Zach Moss for $5 at the local tavern. Well, now he's selling out arenas, so make sure that Zach Moss is on your radar, not Devin Singletary.
Yeah, I don't have any other hipster references I can make right now when it comes to Laviska Shenault. So I'll just tell you that maybe you should keep an eye on him. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the Jaguars offense, and that sort of speaks to the fact that there aren't any really defined roles beyond DJ Chark. But Shenault at Colorado was a do-it-all guy in that offense. Now, take this for what it's worth. Keenan McCardell, who's the wide receiver coach there, has said that after the catch, Shenault reminds him of Anquan Bolden. And that is pretty high praise and certainly worth taking a shot at in the double-digit rounds in your draft.
Love that pick, Marcus, but I want to still be a hipster because when I was a kid, I used to go watch Real Big Fish play, and their supporting act was this band called Blink 182. And in this instance, Henry Ruggs is Real Big Fish. Brian Edwards is Blink 182. This is the guy who has been the most impressive in Raiders camp. Listen, this is not going to be a high volume passing offense, but where you are getting him in your drafts, Brian Edwards is somebody that you should be targeting in those late rounds. When you're sitting there and you're looking at the draft board and you're saying to yourself, I've never heard of any of these guys, but you'll remember Rank comparing them to Blink 182, and you'll say, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on this guy, and you're not going to be disappointed.
So if you
want to stay true to the hipster game, yeah, you got to dump him, right? Once people catch on, right? Once people start listening to Old Town Road on the radio, you're not a hipster anymore. It's just not fun. You have to stay true to the hipster game. Good look there. It's a big week, folks, for fantasy managers as we hit the peak of draft season. If you got a late start on your prep, how about 3 hours of Fantasy Draft Spectacular? You can check it out on the NFL Fantasy app or at youtube.com/NFL Fantasy Football, and you'll get insight from a deep roster of experts like this bold prediction from Maurice Jones-Drew.
We got to talk about something that you said. I believe it was on GMFB. Do we have his quote on Tom Brady? He is going to thrash 2007. 55 touchdowns. MJD, why are you so confident in Tom Brady this season?
Tom Brady has weapons that he's never had before, right? You have a young Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, O.J. Howard. And we know that Tom, people say, well, he doesn't have the arm strength. It's not about arm strength in this league. It's about timing and anticipation, and Tom has that. And so you pair all that up together with a coach that wants to break records and throw the ball over the yard, all those weapons, and Tom, who's seen every defense, you won't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher than that, to be honest with you.
Higher than 55?
And remember
Can
the
I
rules
get a
in
70?
football. You can't touch receivers either. So, like, these dudes are going to be running down the field. I was being conservative with 55, to be honest with you, Rain.
Let's wrap up our positional breakdown series on NFL Fantasy Live here with the defenses and special teams. We'll start with those top-tier defenses, guys, that are worth drafting just a little bit earlier than people might think.
Well, we saw the Steelers in that mixtape right there, and let's not forget, they were the number 2 defense in fantasy last year. We might have forgotten about that because they were a whopping 44 points behind the New England Patriots because the Patriots were just lights out last season. What could really help this defense more than anything else is on the offensive side of the football, where Ben Roethlisberger is back. If he stays healthy and this offense goes back to being productive again, that takes a lot of pressure off this defense, and they could finish as the top fantasy defense overall.
I'm going to make a shocking pick right here and go with the Chicago Bears, who, in a similar situation to the Steelers, I know, but a lot of people forgot how good they were defensively last year, and they did that without Akeem Hicks. They did that with Eddie Jackson playing out of position. Now you've got a healthy Akeem Hicks. You got rid of Leonard Floyd for Bobby Quinn. That's a huge upgrade. And now Eddie Jackson's going to be able to go back, play his natural position, and go back to being the playmaker that we remember him from 2 years ago. And remember, special teams is also part of this. So you get Tariq Cohen and Cordell Patterson. So I think this is a great pick.
And both of you guys went with teams, the defenses that had offenses that you kind of wanted to simulate through and not watch and see if they're a little bit better here in 2020. Let's look over, Marcus, at some candidates on the defensive side that you can probably wait a little bit to get.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Vikings right here. Now, originally, I had the Chargers in this slot, but news of Derwin James with an injury that is expected to keep him out a while has sort of changed that. This Vikings defense, you see that, tied for the fewest points allowed per game in the NFL. They add Yannick Ngakoue. They get him in a trade with the Jaguars. It's just Jaguars Day on this show. He joins Danielle Hunter up front to make a tough defensive line there. This defense could push back to elite status, I believe, in 2020.
I really like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. See, I don't like the Vikings, so I don't even want to give them any more credit, but I like the Buccaneers. And last year when you were playing fantasy, you wanted to target the Bucs, except in the second half of the season, they were so much better because they were starting to understand Todd Bowles' system. Now you look at a team that was 5th in takeaways last year, a lot of young talent on that team. They made some great free agent acquisitions. I think the Buccaneers could be a sneaky sleeper fantasy defense this season.